So the reality of our days is that if we're lucky, we spend about a third of our time sleeping, a third of our time not really seeming to get anything accomplished at all. Now, for some of us, of course, maybe we only get 4 hours or 6 hours, but even still, if you're getting 4 hours, 24, that's 1/6 of it, about 17% of your day is spent asleep. Now, this is really an issue that people, psychologists, have struggled with for a while. Why? Why do we sleep? Why do we spend all of this time doing nothing? And I suppose to really answer that, all we have to do is to think about what happens to us when we are sleep deprived. And of course, all of us have gone through that. You can feel it mentally in terms of your thinking ability, emotionally, and also physically. And of course, the impact of sleep deprivation accumulates the more we are deprived. And that's because sleep does a number of things as we are laying silently. One of the big things that's going on is physically, sleep enables us to rebuild the proteins in our body that are necessary for brain growth, that are necessary to create neurotransmitters and hormones and the tissues that support, of course, all of our systems. It's also necessary to repair any damaged tissue, so that we see that certainly wound healing, externally or internally, takes much longer if people don't sleep. Our growth hormone increases. Now, this is not only important for children who are growing, but even in order to sustain healthy metabolism and, of course, healthy repair of tissue, also healthy bone growth, we need this growth hormone. We see that sleep boosts our immune function because it enhances the activity of white blood cells. Sleep is also necessary to counteract the accumulation of free radicals. Now, that's a phrase that often gets tossed around, but with normal cellular metabolism, all of our cells will give off compounds that are known as free radicals, and free radicals are able then to cause damage to nearby or surrounding tissue. Now, we can neutralize free radicals by consuming antioxidants in things like vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, wine, fish oils. These kinds of things have antioxidants. But another thing that we can do is also to just sleep. Sleep will reduce free radicals. This is especially important for brain health. Another thing that I'm going to really emphasize to you all is the importance of sleep for strengthening our memory. So one of the worst things you can do before a test is to stay up all night studying. Because when we sleep, what ends up happening is it consolidates or solidifies our memory circuits, so that whatever we were studying, whatever we encountered earlier, gets solidified. And so even by just laying there peacefully, like the little guy in the picture, your brain is undergoing memory changes. So it is really important to get our sleep. All right, so now I want to move on to maybe some things that we're already very familiar with, and that's how our brains, including our cognition, our emotionality, and also our physical abilities, are affected when we are sleep deprived. And sleep deprivation is really something that can emerge even after just one night of getting significantly less than our ideal amount of sleep. So I won't go over everything that's on this chart, although I will point out that some of these things really seem to only appear with chronic, significant sleep deprivation. So for example, hallucinations, tremors, those kinds of things we really only see with a severe level of sleep deprivation. Now, some of these other physiological risks, like impaired immune function, increased risk of diabetes or heart disease, growth suppression, those are also things that are going to emerge with chronic sleep deprivation. So I think it's kind of ironic that one of the best ways to decrease your risk of obesity is to simply get a good night's sleep. By actually holding your body still, you are improving your metabolism. All right, so I assume you're pretty familiar with sleep in terms of what happens when we don't get it. Hopefully from the reading, you were also able to become a little bit familiar with the distinction between REM sleep and non-REM sleep. And of course, non-REM sleep can be divided into 4 separate stages. And those separate stages are distinguished based upon the pattern of brain activity. So when we very, very first fall asleep, so what we're looking at in this chart is first you're awake, and then you go from being awake and you slip down, where's my cursor? You slip down into stage 1 sleep. So stage 1 sleep is where we can experience kicks and muscle twitches if you ever felt like you were falling and all of a sudden woke up with a jolt. That kind of experience typically occurs in stage 1 sleep. The brain is still really active. And then from stage 1 sleep, you can see we drop down to stage 2. Stage 2, the brain is less active. You have lower heart rate, lower breathing, lower blood pressure. So if you have somebody that you sleep with, you can probably tell as they get deeper into sleep, their breathing gets more regular and a little bit slower. So as we progress down then from stage 2 to stage 3, down to stage 4, we're getting progressively less and less brain activity, lower breathing rate, lower heart rate. Really, we're getting into a deep, deep sleep. And if you try to wake somebody up when they are in stage 3 or stage 4, it can be really challenging because the brain is not very active. And so you're trying to take the brain from this very inactive state to all of a sudden highly active. And it's really difficult to do. So times when you find it really difficult to wake up, it's probably because your alarm is going off when you're in stage 3 or stage 4. If you find it fairly easy to wake up, it's probably because you were up in the more active stages of maybe stage 2 or REM sleep. And I will say this is something that I disagree with the book on. I think the book says it's really hard to wake people up in REM sleep. I've seen the opposite story in other places. So I just wanted to make that disclaimer. All right, now we go from stage 4, sometimes up to stage 3. In this graphic, you can see it has somebody going directly from stage 4 up to stage 2. So we basically go deeper and deeper and deeper up into lighter stages of sleep, deeper and deeper, lighter stages of sleep, and you can see we kind of progress from deep to light sleep throughout the night. Now, when we go from stage 2, we don't actually go back into stage 1. We skip that, and we go straight to REM sleep. REM sleep, of course, is where we're dreaming, very vivid dreams. Certain parts of our brain are very active. Our amygdala, which is our emotion center, is very active. That's why a lot of times dreams can have very strong emotional content, especially fear or anger. Our hippocampus is very active. I said on an earlier slide that the memory consolidation is happening when we are sleeping. This is especially pronounced in REM sleep because the hippocampus is so active. The one area of the brain that is noticeably inactive is the prefrontal cortex. One of the things that prefrontal cortex does for us is it helps determine what is situationally appropriate. Remember back when we were talking about brain damage, a lot of those guys who had frontal lobe damage were doing things that were socially inappropriate. Well, you might find that when you're dreaming, you're doing things that are socially inappropriate, or maybe just plain old impossible, like flying or going to class naked, something like that. And that's because your prefrontal cortex isn't active to tell you that makes no sense. All right, so you might spend, probably about 60 minutes going all the way up here, probably about 20 minutes in REM, and then you drop down to stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, 3, 2, back up into REM. You can see again, we're skipping stage 1. Now, what I want to draw your attention to is as we go through the night, we end up spending less and less time down in these deep, deep sleep stages and more time in the REM sleep. And so if you're cutting yourself off with only 3.5 hours of sleep, you're missing out on all of this good REM sleep. You're missing out on that nice memory consolidation time. So it really is important to give yourself a full night, at least 6 hours of sleep. One final thing that I want to say about REM sleep is that even though, or perhaps because, our brains are so active and we're acting out different scenarios, it is really important that our bodies be paralyzed. If I'm having a dream about flying, I really need my body to be paralyzed so my body doesn't try to fly. That wouldn't be very successful. So during REM sleep, we're actually paralyzed from the neck down. And so sometimes REM is considered paradoxical sleep because our brains are so active, but our bodies are very inactive. Now, a lot of times when I bring up that little factoid about the body being paralyzed during REM sleep, a lot of times people will raise their hands and say, well, then what's going on when we are sleepwalking? And the reality is that sleepwalking does not occur during REM sleep. It does not occur during that dreaming phase. Instead, sleepwalking tends to occur in stages 3 or 4, when our brains are very inactive. And so often what people will do when they're sleepwalking is they tend to do highly routine, highly habitual actions. My stepson, for example, he walked down the steps, went over to the kitchen trash can, opened the kitchen trash can, and proceeded to pee into it. Okay, well, going pee, that's a pretty habitual action. Walking down the steps, walking into the kitchen, that's pretty routine. I've seen some cute little videos of people pouring big mixing bowls full of cereal and sitting in a tub to eat it. So these are funny, but they tend to be very simple actions because the brain is very inactive. It's a myth that you can't wake up a sleepwalker or that it's dangerous to wake up a sleepwalker. It is very difficult to wake up a person who's sleepwalking because they're in that deep, deep sleep, but it's not going to hurt them if you wake them up. Sleepwalking is more common in kids, primarily because a child's sleep regulation systems in their brain are not properly matured, so they don't regulate like they should. But a lot of people mature out of it. Not everybody does. And I know the book talks a little bit about sleepwalking. I don't have too much to say about insomnia except to encourage you to just read over this. Many people experience insomnia. For some people, it's an inability to fall asleep. For other people, it might be an inability to stay asleep. For example, my husband, if he doesn't take any kind of sleep aid, can fall asleep no problem at 10:30 at night. But by 1:30 in the morning, he's up, and then he basically tosses and turns for the remainder of the night. A lot of causes for insomnia. Certainly the chief cause is going to be emotional stress, anxiety. But another big cause is problems with our sleep environment. So for example, if you are somebody who does a lot of work on your bed with your laptop on your lap, we kind of get into some of the classical conditioning stuff, you are associating all of those stressors with work with your sleep environment. So as soon as you get into your bed, bam, what comes to mind? All of the work that you have to do, and that's what keeps you up. So a lot of times psychologists and physicians will recommend to people who have insomnia that they keep their bed an area for cuddling and for sleeping, a place for relaxing, positive experiences. So if you are having trouble sleeping, I encourage you to examine your sleep environment. All right, that does it for sleep. The next video is going to be focusing on memory.